like to call this Instruction Committee meeting to order. And starting off with the acceptance of minutes, can I get consensus? This is not my normal meeting, so I feel like a little fish out of water. This is not my meeting normally, so. Can I get consensus on the Instruction Committee meeting minutes of October 10th, 2017? Starting with Kathy.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, with clerical corrections on page 5.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
And
I
yes.
will give it.
Okay, item 3, and really our sole item, and I am excited about this. It's a presentation of the 2017-18 elementary school improvement plans, and we've got all the administrators. So first off, I want to say thank you. I know it's challenging. You guys are always running and to now have to come to a night meeting, so thanks so much for coming. And I'm not sure, Carrie, should I turn this over to you? You've got the process, I assume?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
So this evening, all the elementary principals are here to present their school improvement plans for the coming school year. This is in conjunction with our last presentation where we showed our district results and our district plan moving forward. This will break it down by level. So K2 will present first, followed by 3-5, and then in next month's meeting, you'll hear from middle school and high school. So this takes all the data from our previous time and we'll isolate it by school.
Great.
So first up is Chris Friend, Cook Hill School.
And before, Chris, you start, I just want to, for TV land, and I want to be true to this because it's a commitment we made to board members that our meeting is roughly going to end around 8 o'clock. That's what we committed to for this evening. So I just want to remind everybody, watch your clocks for yourselves. And if we start derailing you guys, tell us we're derailing you. So, I want to be true to you guys so you each get equal time to present your information. So, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. So it's nice to be here to finally go over our data, school data for the beginning of the year. As you know, we began doing our universal screening assessments in September. And especially where the K2 school is concerned, what I noticed and what I'm sharing with you mostly is reading data. On the left-hand side is the ERLA data for Cook Hill School. And as you can see, our kindergartners are looking like they're at risk at this point because they are not readers and they're just coming in and learning their letters and their sounds and haven't really learned to put all the concepts of print together with their phonological awareness. And so for that reason, they're looking like they're at risk, but I have faith that they will, most of them, be proficient. I'm encouraged by only having 4 in the emergency range at this point. As you know, we have quite a large ELL population, bilingual population at Cook Hill, and so oftentimes our students that come into kindergarten being bilingual have never spoken English outside of their home. So it's quite a learning curve, and we have several kids in our kindergartens who are working with a bilingual teacher every day. In our first grade, we have a little bit of a strange phenomenon, something that concerned me right away, and that is sort of an upside-down SRBI triangle. In other words, what we like to see is most of our students at risk or proficient, and the very smallest amount at the emergency range. And what we see here is, kind of even across the board. So I've already gone back to my grade level teachers and had conversations in grade level meetings about that. What we have discovered, and I think you would understand this, is that the difference between an independent student at the end of kindergarten and an independent student at the beginning of first grade is somewhat, there's some subjectivity there. So where we expect our first graders to be reading on their own and independently using strategies, the end of kindergarten, they still received prompting from the people they are most familiar with, like their teachers. And so after spending the summer away and coming back the first couple weeks of September being screened, they did not look as independent, and they weren't taking those risks with the print without prompting. And so the first grade teachers really felt that they weren't as proficient as they had left kindergarten. What we found that since the beginning of September, now that we're at the end of October, beginning of November, some of those students have quickly gained back and are where they were when they left kindergarten.
Jay, you weren't here right off that 6. No problem, but I can turn this meeting over to, I started, do you want me to?
You're doing a great job.
Okay, I'm happy to do whatever, okay.
I'm just gonna grab one
That's
of the
fine.
packets, if I may, and
Yep.
hand it out.
Okay, Mike,
Just a quick question. Can you just explain the numbers again?
Sure.
The number on the left is is a number of students?
Yes.
Like, let's go to emergency under grade 1.
Yes.
30 students?
30 students
that
showed up at the emergency level. And now remember, this is the first 2 weeks of September when the test was given or the assessment was given. 30 students showed up at the emergency level, which was very concerning for me.
This is based on ERLA?
Mm-hmm.
The first one, I mean, the only one session doing the ERLA with the child?
Yes. Yes.
Is that's subjective for the
It's a little bit subjective, yes, but we do it with a team approach, so it's not just the classroom teacher, it's also the interventionists that go into the classroom. So it's sort of a team where 4 people are going in at the same time and assessing the different students in the classroom. So we do feel like it's a little less subjective that way, and the interventionists are right there on board with the classroom teacher. However, there is some subjectivity to it. And what we realized quickly was the prompting is one of the subjective pieces that we then needed to tease out with our kindergarten teachers.
So you have 31 children at risk?
We had 31 children at risk at the beginning of
And 32
September.
that are reading proficiency.
Right,
So those 3 numbers, that's the total number of first graders.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Second grade looks a little bit more like you would expect it to look, although we would prefer that 46 and 32 to be flip-flopped. Our second grade readers, I think what we realized, and we've done a lot of discussion already at our grade level meetings, but I think what we realized the difference between first and second grade is the level of comprehension that we're requiring. So in first grade, the comprehension is a little bit more literal and less inferential, and the second grade teachers are expecting the students to think outside the box, to really get those inferential pieces, to be able to retell the story at greater length and detail than they are in first grade. And they're asking that without prompting. So I think that what we're seeing now is our numbers are changing already, but basically that's where we were at the beginning of September. On the right-hand side is the STAR reading data, and as you can see, we did not give it to kindergarten as of yet. We are giving our first STAR early literacy assessment to kindergarten students in December. So first grade showed 42% at or above, 23% on watch, and 34% at intervention. Second grade showed 51% at or above, 20% on watch, and 28% at that intervention level. So we have our work cut out for us. We certainly want to have many more at or above and fewer numbers in our intervention range.
So
Yes.
This you're not going to have in front of you, but I was wondering, is there any way we can get the end of the year numbers for the cohorts so that we can compare? Because when I looked through this, I noticed that our numbers are very high for at-risk and intervention, and it's the beginning of the school year. So I kind of wanted to compare and see where we ended to see how much is lost over the summer, and if maybe that's something that I know we can't do necessarily in district, but maybe it's a program we could reach out to some of our not-for-profits who have our kids over the summer. Because if that's what's happening, and what you were saying about the prompting, and they're leaving kindergarten at a certain level, and then they're coming into first grade, and now they've got to catch up from those
Right.
2 months.
Right.
Maybe there's some kind of targeted program we can put into place that doesn't cost the district money and will help with this issue.
So we have had conversations at our grade levels about that too, and how we could better support those children going off for the summer. Even just supporting their parents in how to help them at home throughout the summer, and how to possibly provide more on our Cook Hill School website to have the, things available for them during the summer. Our summer school attendance wasn't great, and that's concerning. We also have some students who took part in the bilingual ELL summer school and not the reading summer school, so I'm not sure if the same focus on literacy is there in that particular one, or if they would have taken two if they could have. So I think we do need to look at summer school opportunities and how we can reach those students, because there definitely was, for Cook Hill, a decline after the summer. In our STAR math scores on the bottom there for second grade and first grade are also somewhat concerning. Especially since last year we had very few students who qualified for math intervention in first and second grade. So in kindergarten we did have a few, so the first grade does account for some of those. But in our first grade last year we had very few students qualifying for math intervention, and in second grade they're not looking like they're where they need to be. So we need to look at our curriculum a little bit more closely. We need to have those conversations about data, and also aligning or calibrating our data so that our curriculum and our district assessments are matching what's expected on the STAR.
So Chris, I'm curious, and I guess I would open this up to all the administrators, because I'm sure there are pockets, not just at Cook Hill, but at other schools where our bilingual population, I mean, I know I've been in your school where literally a little child,
Right.
2 weeks prior, was in another country and was now at your school and really didn't speak English.
Right.
And I wonder if it doesn't change the percentages and the numbers, but it doesn't tell your story. And I'm wondering, is there an opportunity to show how many students in the beginning of the year that came to you that aren't speaking English, or really severely, English as a second language? And the work and then supporting what Sean is saying, because you and I have had this conversation as well, the growth of those folks, of those little people, if they're plunked into another country, literally in September, which happens to be in our school district, to see their growth from September to even January, then obviously to June, is exponential. But, just from an anecdotal standpoint, have you guys considered showing that stat at all?
So I think that would be very interesting. I also think that it's important to note that STAR reading and STAR math is given in English, and we do see that our EL and bilingual students do have difficulty with that. There is a Spanish component for the early literacy, and we have experimented with giving the early literacy in Spanish to our Spanish speakers, and what we have seen is that their scores in Spanish are usually higher than their scores in English on the same phonological components. However, clearly the language is a barrier for them when they take the STAR.
I just would hate for somebody in the community to look at your numbers, or any of our schools' numbers for that matter, and not understand your specific makeup in each of your respective schools and the impact that has on your teachers and your staff, and the work that the way you have to approach that. So I'm not trying to make work for you folks, but I don't think it's being fair to tell the real story of what your staff deals with, especially in September potentially. But just a comment I'd make. Yeah, Karen?
To maintain the level of functioning over the summer, is there any kind of, because I know some children have summer programming, but some don't, and they might be home with grandma or another relative. Is there any kind of workbook or something that we can recommend so that they can keep their skills up during the summer?
So it's funny that you should say that because our team's looking at all of our treasures books in our conference room where we meet at our grade level meetings every week. We have often wondered if there were things on those shelves that would be helpful to put into hands of students. So we are starting to explore that. We are using less of the anthology in the classrooms and more guided reading in the classrooms. And perhaps some of those anthologies, which contain several stories, would be a great thing to send home for the summer months. They'd have several stories at their level to read and then be able to bring it back in at the end of the summer. So we have talked about that.
Great.
Okay, so at Cook Hill, our action plans are centered on reading or English language arts and math, and so our steps are as follows. We are working to analyze and implement assessment information using multiple measures, which I went over some of them on the previous slide. However, we also use district-wide performance tasks, informative assessments in the classrooms to inform instruction. So looking at our data, we're having conversations at grade level teams, at faculty meetings, at SRBI EIP teams, at PPTs, at 504 meetings. We are talking with our bilingual and our EL staff to make sure that we are informing instruction using our assessment measures. We're also working to apply standards, indicators, and scoring criteria to evaluate student mastery. So when we do an assessment, we have to sit together and calibrate that assessment to make sure that we all agree on the scoring of that assessment, and that's really crucial so that students are getting the right feedback and so that teachers are feeling prepared to teach their students. We are working to create an environment that further supports personalized learning, that honors student voice and choice, and clearly defines learning indicators and criteria for success. And that's a difficult thing to do at K2 level, but we're trying very hard to make sure that we are having posted learning targets and that students can articulate them. We're looking to collaborate further with our coaches to provide more PD in the classroom and job-embedded professional development. We're looking to increase the use of nonfiction text, which is part of the Common Core, and using that in our areas of science and social studies content areas so that we can make sure that we are integrating their learning across the day. We're also collaborating with Kate O'Donnell, our science curriculum resource teacher, to unpack the NGSS standards. And especially exciting at Cook Hill, we are working on expanding field explorations. We had 7 teachers attend the Seedlings Institute Collaborative over the summer, last summer. It's an educators collaborative. They went to, it's out of New Haven, and it's a wonderful opportunity to come together with teachers from a lot of schools around the area, but also to connect with community resources, and it has a science or a STEM based. So a lot of our teachers have taken on some work in that area. Are there any questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Up next is Moses, no, I'm sorry. It's Highland, excuse me. Vicki Reed. Welcome.
Hi. How does this move? Here we are. Okay, my data is somewhat similar to Cook Hill's data. You might find some commonalities between all of the K2 schools. On the left-hand side is our ERLA data that was from September. As you can see, that our second grade at-risk numbers are a little high. Well, they're all a little high. And our proficient numbers could be higher. That's what we're going to be working on for the whole year. Right now, I took a look today. The numbers have started to go the other way. So we have more students that are proficient and less that are at risk. On the right-hand side is our STAR data, and you can see this was from the beginning of the year. We had roughly about 50% of the students in grade 1 and grade 2 in math at the proficient level, and almost 50% grade 1 in reading at the proficient level. The other students were on watch and in intervention, and then our goal obviously is going to have more and more students at and above rather than at the intervention level. And we are doing that by action plan. We are having collaboration meetings as often as possible, and those meetings are used to review data. We're also, back in August, we had a PD on formative assessment. So each of my grade levels have selected a content area to develop a formative assessment plan, meaning that they will agree as a grade level when they're going to administer a formative assessment, what the formative assessment will be, and then when they administer it, we will analyze the data as a grade level. We'll also look at performance task data and do some cross-teacher grading for inter-rater reliability, make sure that if we all agree that a 4 is a 4, it is a 4. We are also working on student voice and choice. The staff at my school has worked hard at creating voice and choice for students with homework. We're doing homework, but now we're moving into centers and stations and the Daily 5 during the LA block and math block so that students can choose which activity they want to participate in and give a little more freedom and choice to the students in each of the grade levels, K through 2. Let's see. As far as collaborating with special ed and EL staff during grade level collaboration, that is a very, very big challenge because of scheduling, time-wise, especially for my ELL teacher because she is split between Highland and Yalesville. So it's even tricky to do that, but we're working on that. I can't stress enough to all of you the value of the literacy and math coach. They attend our collaboration meetings the week that they're at our school. They go into the classroom, they provide job-embedded PD, help review instructional strategies, go over some of the data. They're really a very important resource that my staff has embraced. Purchase of nonfiction text. Our library budget will be used this year to purchase all nonfiction texts. I think tomorrow the librarians are meeting with science, and I'm actually going to go to science for the PD tomorrow, and they're going to be looking at purchasing books that would align with the new next generation science standards. So my librarian, who's a long-term sub, will be working with the other librarians, and we'll be using our money to purchase those books. Yes?
So, do you guys have use like magic school bus books and stuff like that for science? I'm not saying that specific book, but it's the only example I could think of where it's a story, but it also implements, especially for kindergarten and first grade, implements science. Is that the kind of book?
We have those in our library. We also have some of the videos. I know one is the water cycle. I can't think of any of the other ones, but I do remember the water cycle, so we have those in our library.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mean that specifically, but I mean, is that the kind of books you guys are, I'm just trying to get an image, because you're the second principal to talk about the non-fictional texts in science and relating to reading, so I was just trying to get an image of what that would be at this level.
Yeah, it's going to be a combination of a magic school bus type, but also more of a factual book that will have the actual image of, say, a grasshopper and labeling all the parts of the grasshopper's body at a level that our students could read.
Thank you, I was just trying to picture it.
Sure.
'Cause they're so young, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a weird question.
One thing that we worked on at Highland School this year with our August and September PD, and they're both connected. One was on vocabulary, academic vocabulary. We had a great day, I thought, focusing on academic vocabulary. And the reason I mentioned that is very connected to my next bullet, which is about English language learners. And then we had the ESL teacher and myself presented a PD for our staff on English language learners, and the two are connected in a very strong way. English language learners, and just so you know, Highland has 13 different languages that are spoken at our school. It's challenging. I can tell you some of them: Mandarin, Portuguese, Turkish, Arabic, Spanish. There's a lot of different languages. What's important for English language learners, one, is to learn the vocabulary. There's a progression for language acquisition, and so it was very important for my staff, who over the years have seen more and more different languages coming into the building. Unlike some of my colleagues, it was important for them to understand how students acquire language and what is going to happen first. And what happens first is the speaking and the listening. What comes later is the reading and the writing, and that's where the academic content comes in. So good instruction in the classroom will support all students, but especially English language learners, as they're learning that academic vocabulary. So some of those instructional strategies would include gestures, pantomiming, letting students try out the words, giving a definition, and making it visible somewhere in the classroom. Also, having students use those words more than once. So some of the strategies that I've told my teachers to use include having the vocabulary words posted and referring to them not just once, because if you do it once, they're not going to own it. It has to be multiple times. And then we talked about a time when maybe you have 5 minutes before the next activity, putting the vocabulary words in a bag or a box, and then you have 5 minutes to spare. Ooh, here's this word. Who thinks they can put it in a sentence? You got that right, and keeping track of it. So little things like that to help with the vocabulary, not only for English language learners, but for all students. So my staff is working on that. We just passed Halloween, and it was a great vocabulary moment in many classrooms with skeletons and Halloween and a lot of Halloween words which they were using in their writing. So that was helpful, and we're going to continue to work on that during the year. Yes.
So how are you addressing the challenges? I know you just mentioned some really great techniques, but often when we think of ELL, I know we probably generally think of Spanish, right? But you have 13 different languages, so I can't imagine that we have a teacher that speaks 13 different languages in place. Right. So how are you handling that challenge, especially when it comes to assessments and stuff like that?
Well, the process is the same as it would be for a Spanish-speaking student. My EL teacher does not speak Spanish. Her native language is Russian. Oh, cool. And I can't remember the other language that she speaks. So her job is to teach English to all of the students. So she has a variety of strategies. She does music, pictures, a lot of visuals are very important. And the strategies that she uses will depend on their score on the Lost Links test. So a student who's a level 1 student is going to need much more visual, auditory support than a student who might be a level 3 or 4. Also, what language is spoken at home and how fluent in English are the parents at home. So if the child is speaking Mandarin Chinese at home all the time and the parent doesn't speak any English, that's different than a child whose parents speak fluent English at home. So my ESL teacher is wonderful. She works through that, has the parents come in, tries to find out during parent conference time what is happening in the home, how we can support them at home, what materials we can send. We obviously will send books at their instructional level that they could read at home and make connections. We have the K2 buildings are working with adult ed, and we have our, it's a retired Highland teacher who is the instructional teacher that works with the parent and the child after Mr. Moffo works with the parent on their English through adult ed, and it takes place in our buildings 2 days a week. So we have that in place too.
And that brings me to my next question.
Yep.
How are you finding communicating with parents? Because I know we've been moving towards translating a lot of documents into languages that are spoken more frequently, but in your case, you don't necessarily have that situation. Right. You have a very unique kind of makeup.
Right. I have a translator for Chinese. We have a district translator for Spanish. And so far, the Arabic and the other languages, those parents have spoken English.
Okay, so now my question to you. Are we using like the language access line or anything like that? Because there are some resources out there.
There's a
that-
variety of resources. We've used some of the language lines. We also use CHOAT. There's also services through the state. So we do have many of the documents now from the state come out in multiple languages because the state, we reflect now more accurately what the rest of the state looks like in terms of immigrant population coming into Connecticut. So we have a variety of resources. We stay away from Google Translator because it is offensive in many cases to other people speaking different languages. But we have developed a cadre, and I think that when the principals reach out to us, we try to make the connection. I know SCOW, even though they're known as Spanish Community of Wallingford, they're not just representing students and families of a Latino background. They're able to connect us with other agencies too.
I really appreciate it, and I just think it's important that everyone knows that it's not an easy thing. It's very difficult, and one of the focuses for, I know, our principals in particular is to increase parent engagement in the learning of their children. And a really big barrier for that would be not being able to communicate with the parents. So I just want to commend you on what you're doing. It sounds amazing and very difficult, but still amazing.
I think, as you can tell, and I don't want to continue much further because I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance, but the fact is that I think one of the things that we wanted to make certain people understood, and I appreciate Roxanne and many others' comments, that our Wallingford Public Schools is much more diverse than what it once was. And with that are always opportunities for improvement on part of our teaching staff, but also opportunities for us to learn from those cultures and those backgrounds. But it does present, when we try to move everyone towards a proficiency level in English, it does present some additional challenges that we're working to come together and not see them as challenges, but truly as opportunities for growth in ourselves as educators. But we have the EL population. We have a growing, as many of you know, special ed or special needs population, the emotional, the anxiety, the social emotional concerns that continue to increase, not just in Wallingford. But I think when I went back and looked at data back from the late 90s, to today, when we look at our testing data, we're a very different district than we were in 1998. We're extremely different, and that's awesome. That, in my mind, that is excellent. Because many of the magnet school opportunities that were established and that we participated as a district was to give students a different experience than they would have in their neighborhood in Wallingford. Now, for better or for worse, I believe for better, we don't have students leaving our district because we reflect the larger community that they wanted, that their parents maybe wanted them to experience. So it is important to keep everything in context, because I know we want to have every student reading at grade level. But again, and that will still be our challenge, and these 8 individuals, as well as the 4 other schools that aren't here this evening, that is all of our challenge. But it is definitely a different landscape on which we have to situate ourselves in terms of those educational opportunities.
Yes, and thank you for all your hard work in central office and all of you principals to get into all of our students and making it a wonderful learning experience regardless of their cultural background.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions? Okay.
Thanks, Vicki. Up next is Moses Y. Beach, Rob Rosario. Hey, Rob.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you?
Great.
Once again, Rob Rosario, proud principal of Moses Y. Beach. You're going to see some similarities as my slide comes up next. And I think I will take an opportunity to birdwalk maybe just a little bit. As I'm hearing folks kind of share, there's so much more that can't be captured just from the salient points, hitting reading and math on a slide. So I promise I'll stay within my 10 minutes. Our data looks fairly similar. Once again, when you see this caption, the emergency, at-risk, and proficient or above, the 3 bands, once again, that's for IRLA, the Independent Reading Level Assessment. And the snapshot's taken at a certain portion at the beginning of the year, and I want to caution when we look at the numbers, yes, I have a single digit as well in kindergarten for emergency. I remember vividly last year setting my goal when sitting down with Mrs. Lavalette, feeling great about what my numbers looked like. Again, this is October. 2 weeks transpired, and the numbers completely flip-flopped and went into the red. In other words, they're on a timestamp as well at certain portions. So as we take the data, I would also invite folks to ask us for some data updates periodically, because they do move quickly and they shift. So while we digest this and we plan from it, moving forward, it is fairly fluid. So just something I would throw out as an invite to have a conversation over time.
Explain that to us a little further.
Sure. So the benchmark is actually determined over a portion of time. So for kindergarten, looking at the reading levels, there's actually 4 levels. As opposed to if I go to the other end of the spectrum, the second grade actually has 2 levels. So as you can imagine, they move at different rates. And the timestamp, depending on when you pull the data, could be across 2 benchmark windows, which would change whether they were red, yellow, or green, depending on where
Rob,
they
you're
fell.
saying, for example, the 2 levels, is one a higher level than another? Or is it
Correct.
different?
Second grade is
it
broken up
first half
into-
of the year versus second half of the year?
It is broken up into 6-month or 5-month increments. So it's
5-month
first half. So for example, second grade is 1R and 2R, as opposed to kindergarten that has 4 levels spanning 2 colors. And the only reason I share that is not to confuse people, but that it looks so simple in 3-color chart here, but it is fairly complex when you take a look at the data over time.
I'm still not clear on it. So 1R versus 2R, does that mean 1R is what they should learn by the end of the first half of the year?
Correct.
And 2R means that they should learn by the second half, by the end of the second half of the year?
Yes.
So if you're testing them in the beginning of the first half of the year, they may show lower because they haven't had that half of the year to learn.
Correct.
material. Is that what?
So
what? Okay. So I think back to Shauna's point, why aren't we looking at what they ended last year with? Why are we looking, since it's just the beginning of the year, why are we looking at how they're doing when it's reflecting what they're supposed to know at the halfway through the year?
this is just a snapshot of a point in time now. As a part of those grade level collaborations, teachers do have access to individual profiles. So for their entire class cohort, we can go and put up a trajectory to see where the student ended, where they are now, and where we want them to be at the end of the year. So you do see that on our level, and as a part of all the conversations where you hear consensus, collaboration.
I mean, for Jay's confusion, isn't the point, not to interrupt you, Rob, but all of your numbers that you're sharing, that's as a result of testing that occurred in September.
September,
So
correct.
that's where that's coming from, Jay, if that
It's
helps.
just the most up to
No,
date.
I'm not understanding. Let's say this was last year's data. So take second grade.
Yeah,
and
take
the early,
second grade.
right? So 21.4% emergency, 46% at risk,
Mhm.
and 32% at level proficient. Right? So let's say those were the numbers when they were tested in September of last year as well. So the first half of the year ends when?
December.
January or December?
December, January.
All right, so the first half of the year. At the end of the first half of the year, when they were tested on that same stuff, how much did those move? So now they're through the end of,
Yeah, they're not tested on the same things, though. When you're
It's-
giving the IRLA, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
When you're giving the IRLA, you are taking the child where they are. So they left in June at a particular level. It could have ranged from right on grade level, right where they need to be. They could have been above grade level, or they could have been below grade level. When they come back in September, you're looking at a moment of time, and this is gauging where they are in their reading development. So when you see proficient for kindergarten or for first grade, they're at grade level or above. The at-risk kids might be 6 months behind, 12 months behind, and then your emergency is even further. So it's not a matter of meeting that 1R benchmark. It's where they are in the range of where they should be during that time of the year. And
during
when
September. So when they were, if they
Correct.
were
So
tested
in
September,
October,
that's where they should
yep.
have been for September.
So for example, kindergarten, the first month in September, a lot of our numbers for K2 were in the green, because where they tested the first 2 weeks of September was considered proficient or above for September.
For
and then
for
October,
basically had
yep.
not learned anything in that grade
Correct.
yet.
But October 1st hit, and then you saw a lot of those, that percentage in green shrink down to the yellow, because you're not giving the IRLA every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. You're giving it to get a level. You're instructing the child in small groups or in strategy groups, and you're watching that child develop over time. So when Mr. Arcero talks about a moment of time and the numbers being fluid, that is true. As each month passes, the IRLA expects kids to develop as readers over time, and their proficiency numbers or at-risk numbers or otherwise will shift depending on how much growth or how little growth they made individually during that span of time.
So how often, Carrie, are these administered? You're saying monthly?
Well, to get a level, you level them at the beginning of the year, and then you take that information and you use it along with the information that you're getting during your reading lessons, whole group and small group within the class. And as that child progresses as a reader, and you're taking formative assessment and you're gathering data on the child, because everybody moves a little bit differently, you will then determine, has that child met all of the exit requirements for a particular level and is ready to move on to a new challenge and a new level. So it looks at vocabulary, it looks at decoding, it looks at comprehension. And you want the child to be strong in their ability to read and read for meaning before you're going to move them on to a new level. So the IRLA does a very nice job of distinguishing what requirements are necessary to enter a new reading level and how you need to exit a reading level to make sure that you have some success within a new learning within a new level.
So can I ask you, so this was administered, when do you think, what month?
September.
So let's say you're a second grade student and it's September. I'm assuming that if you're green, if you're proficient, it means that you are, from a reading standpoint, where you should be in the first month of school as a
Yes.
second grader. Is that true?
Yep.
And if they gave it in December, it would say where the student should be, given the fact they've been a second grader from September through December. So it's
Correct.
moving with the student, I think.
It's
Yes.
moving with the student.
Is what you're saying. Yes, so it is,
And you'll
it
find
is
from
apples and
here,
apples.
it is, and you'll find
That's
from
why when you
here,
mentioned the timestamp, that's why I wasn't.
the numbers change depending on the reader. So at this point, teachers are using the IRLA as a guide to ensure that the different standards at the different color levels are being met by the student. And we'll check this again district-wide in December when we do our STAR screening again in December. And we look at student growth again. And then again, teachers will move students through levels at the pace that the child dictates in terms of their learning within reading, but we as a district monitor our scores in the same screen windows that we monitor our STAR scores and
And the
otherwise.
STARS administered how often?
3 times.
3
Three
times.
times a year.
September,
And same thing
December,
with
and
us.
March.
Okay, so
Mhm.
so the December administering of it for a second grader
Mm-hmm.
is measuring where that student should be in December as a second grader.
Correct.
If they're on level to.
Yep.
And if I may,
Sure.
what's really great, and I don't know that every teacher does this, I can only speak from my personal experience, is that the kids get tested on this pretty frequently. And what you get is a sheet home. At least my son's teachers have done this with goals for how to progress their reading. So let's say it's vocabulary. They'll give you, this is where your child is right now, and this is what they need to move on, and this is how you can help them. So as a parent, I find this very helpful, because if it's your child needs to read and be able to recite or answer a question using words from the text, then I can work on that with my child at home. So I find this to be a very good assessment personally. It's very helpful on multiple levels.
Is
That-
that a pretty universal process that she's describing, that information goes to parents to use as a tool, or is
In
that-
various forms,
Okay.
What you're probably referring to is also a skill sheet as well. And
Yeah.
recognize that as the levels change, it becomes increasingly more complex in terms of the types of things they're working on. So it may look very different at 3-5, probably very much a common practice at the pre-K2 level. What I will say, though, is that the spirit of what's in each level, Shauna, to your point, is the meat of what this assessment is about. So it's not just about, we're talking about color levels per se. It's what the skills are within each level. So yes, the teachers will be identifying those power goals or that instructional focus, and that's what they're communicating to parents, what the focus is for kiddos, and they're working on and documenting over time.
Just as a point of reference for the board, and you all know that this is really a continuation of implementation of ERLA. So we started out, at one level where we were identifying levels, reading levels, to be able to identify the colors and move forward. So the next phase, as Shauna describes, of natural implementation and natural launch of this being put in place is that we would expect that the goals be established, that teachers would be monitoring that, and that would be for all students moving forward. So that's the expectation that we are moving forward with as a district, and that we will be reporting back to, because there are some opportunities in looking at some of that data also, which is very valuable potentially to the board as to what goals were established over the course of time. So looking at that by grade level, saying, while looking at this data, digging deeper potentially and saying, okay, well, were the goals all falling into similar categories? Then you go back and you could do a cross-reference to the curriculum to see whether or not there's potentially some areas for improvement instructionally as well as curricular-based.
And the power goals really do set the focus for the small group work that occurs during the language arts block, because it's based on a student's individual needs. And so you can bring small groups of children together based on those power goals or based on a particular strategy that they're weak in. So the power goal setting process is a very important part to the instruction that's taking place in the classroom.
And it ties directly and seamlessly into the overall concept of mastery-based learning, because you're establishing that foundation to take a student from where he or she is to the next level. So you'll be hearing more about the power goals as we move forward this year, because it is an expectation that we'll have for all of our educators moving forward.
Yeah, Shauna.
So I have a question just for you, because I know you have
Sure.
the program in your school for parents.
I do.
And
I
it's
do.
wonderful, and I don't know if the whole board knows about it, but can you explain whether or not you have seen that program influence the ability for your children to read and do math by working with their parents, and how that has affected your numbers at all, if any?
It's difficult because many aspects of what goes into that program really are qualitative pieces of data. I would say yes, it makes a difference in the sense that it's not unique to my school. It is the program that Vicki was referencing earlier, because it has grown, so it's branched out. So it does happen in some of the other schools as well. But yes, we've been fortunate enough to have it for a while now. We've seen great success in that there's nothing like looking down the hallway and seeing parents with their stroller, their little ones, their child on their knee. They're working to learn and unpack what those curricular expectations are and how they can help their children at home. It's been important in the sense that not only is it connecting the academics, but you have to realize when we talk about building consensus and an understanding for folks, yes, these are snapshots and just salient points like I said earlier, but part of our job as school leaders is really helping families to build some of that social capital. Some of the things that everybody in this room knows and takes advantage of, who do you reach out to? Who do you go to if you have a question? For a lot of our families, they don't know that. So bringing them in through programs like family literacy and the excellent work done in collaboration with adult education really helps to build that. That's the piece that's harder to measure, but when you see folks, and I think you would agree from coming to visit, so thank you, it definitely is a worthwhile piece.
Thank you.
All right, I can see I'm on my action plan here. So there are many similarities, so I'll try to point out some maybe highlights that are unique to Moses Y. In addition to analyzing and taking consensus and calibration for some of the strategies that we're using, we're also looking to help further define what mastery looks like for our students. So again, reviewing standards, indicators, and that scoring criteria, and doing that through the grade level conversation. That common time that teachers have is so valuable. We just never can get enough of it. I'm also going to connect to some of the earlier statements about working with some of our families. We too have approximately 16 languages represented at Moses Y. So one of our action steps is to expand and explore culturally responsive teaching practices, and also expand our literature selection. So similar to Highland, we've also reallocated some funds for our library to take a look at some of those materials that can truly support our learners. And I'm not just talking about things in relation to race, but when we look at some of the differences socioeconomically and some of the background experiences our kiddos have, really making sure that we have the materials to address those things. We're collaborating with our district K-2 literacy and math coaches. We want to continue to provide that job-embedded professional development. The elbow-to-elbow experience where teachers are collaborating really is the lever. That's the powerful lever where learning happens. So we're looking to expand the opportunities that we have to do that. We also want to increase the use of our nonfiction text, so we had a little discussion about what that might look like, so I won't belabor that point, but we're too excited about some of the work that begins tomorrow with our science kickoff, and that directly relates to some of the roots that we've set down, similar to what Cook Hill shared. We have a Kinderwoods program piloted last year. I have to give them a shout out through Adrian Ferretti and Ann Poirier. The entire grade level has expanded in kindergarten and is going out once per month to the Choate Environmental Center, and just having a real holistic experience that connects to next generation science standards, and we're building what that academic connection looks like to make it tighter and stronger in planning for what their experience will be later on. Those field explorations are funded by our PTO, and when the kids go out there, check out our website. There's amazing pictures of kids and the things they're doing to build, create, and learn some of those executive functioning skills there with one another as a part of that social emotional learning approach. Any questions? Thank you.
Rob, thanks so much. Christina Kiley is up for EC Stevens. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So, as you can see, the Stevens data is before us, and something that really jumps out, not only to me, but to my staff, is that at-risk group. So if we look at the top and we look at the ERLA data, and we look at the large groups in that yellow at-risk range, that's where a lot of our focus has been and will continue to be. So when I get to my next slide and some of those action steps, I'll share some of the steps that we have in place to help those at-risk students move to proficient, because in many cases they're just one band below. Our emergency students are receiving formal intervention and have a lot of additional support in place. So we're trying to really focus on those at-risk students and embedding supports in their plan so that we can move them to proficient. So I will discuss that a little more on the next slide. Below you can see our STAR scores, and we're working hard to move those intervention students to on watch and on watch to proficient. So eventually by mid-year and end of the year, we have much larger percentages in the proficient range. Before we can help our students soak up. Sure.
So when you mentioned that if they're in emergency and on watch now, and you're looking to move them to proficient by the end of the year, what's your, and I realize measuring, I hate to use the word measuring, but there's something you're comparing them to, right? You need to compare them to. So what you're comparing them to moves forward during the year as well, right, as we were talking before. Because it's now assuming if you're testing them 4 months later, it's assuming that they've learned 4 months.
So what we're really looking at is individual growth. So if we look at, for example, we'll go to STAR for a minute. STAR is adaptive, so I go to take STAR and it meets me where I am as a learner, and it adapts the questions to meet my level of knowledge. So I'm going to look that the next time I take STAR, my score increases, and I'm looking at, and as a school, we're looking at each individual student to see that their scaled score is increasing each time that they take the assessment.
Right, but they have to be learning at a faster rate than what's expected to be learned, right, for that period of time. isn't that a heck of a challenge for somebody that's starting out behind? How do you do that?
I think that's where I'm going to say that's where the exciting part comes in, because that's where we look at each student and we look at what's currently in place and what we can put in place to really help them, because truly we want them to make the most moderate growth that they can. So for some of the students in that, for example, that yellow, that at-risk range, who might not be receiving formal intervention, we want to have strategies in place, such as I have para-educators that work in grade 1, 2 who worked and did some training with our literacy coach, who was able to really walk them through each of those early levels that fell within that that range in the grade level. So for example, she looked at grade 1 and those at-risk levels in grade 1 and grade 2 and the at-risk levels at grade 2, and she really broke apart the levels, shared strategies with those paras so they could then push in and help support those kids in a tier 1 setting. In addition, the literacy coaches as well as our interventionists are pushing in so that they can collaborate with those students informally to offer other support. So we're really trying to put what we can in place so that we can help. I'm going to go back to that yellow group, that at-risk group, with the supports they need, because in many cases they are just one ERLA band below. So we're trying to help them to gain all those skills and master the skills within that level to move to the next.
And you folks think in most cases that enables them to catch up?
While we know that it is a moving target and those levels keep increasing, I think our goal is to see continued growth for each student. So that's really the ultimate goal, whether it's STAR or ERLA. We're looking to see them move from where they are and continue, to move through the levels. Like thinking about some of the goal setting conferences that I've had with teachers, they're looking student by student, where is this student and what's an attainable goal? So really just looking for individual student growth on both the STAR and ERLA assessment.
Your STAR proficiency numbers are not too bad. I mean, the STAR proficiency,
Thank you.
pretty good percentages considering.
We're going to keep going. But in order to get those levels and those numbers to move in a positive direction, we at Stevens feel it's vital to help grow our students social and emotionally, because we have our youngest learners. So we've done a couple of things as a school to help focus on that. One piece having to do with the climate is PD. So starting back in August, we had PD on August 24th for certified staff, and then again on the 25th for non-certified. And I had my psychologist and a responsive classroom team of teachers work with me to put together a PD that really looked at bringing restorative practices and bringing positive supports for behavior, as well as some of those other pieces that we feel our learners need to be able to grow socially and emotionally in the classroom. We visit that topic at staff meetings, and we're going to do another mid-year and end-of-the-year PD, including some de-escalation strategies, so really helping students to be able to grow with their social and emotional skills. We implemented a second step across the school. So thanks to Curriculum, who purchased some of the kits, I was able to purchase the remaining. So each classroom teacher has a second step kit, and we have a co-teach model every day 2 from 9:05 to 9:25, and they work together. I have the specialists working with the classroom teachers, working with the paras, and they do a co-teach lesson of second step.
What specialists?
So what I did is I was able schedule-wise to have intervention, bilingual, my PE teacher, and the psychologists. And in rooms where I couldn't do a specialist and a teacher, I have a para-educator and a teacher. And they're doing a lesson in the second step curriculum each day 2. And the lessons help students to grow in their empathy and their problem solving skills and their ability to communicate and collaborate with other students. And so far, I've had many teachers that have given a lot of positive feedback, and several of them are using that for their evaluation. There's a focus area that teachers have to come up with, so many of them are using one of the attributes from Domain 1 that deals with classroom environment, and they're connecting it and working to grow in that area. So far, we've gotten positive feedback as a school, and we're just working hard to build those social and emotional skills so that we could then focus on enhancing our students' ability to soak up the ELA and math curriculum.
You know what I'm curious about? I should know this, but after a while, the years sort of blend together. Is this our second or third year or full day in kindergarten?
This is our third.
Third year. So everybody in our K-2 schools, our second graders, they went to full day kindergarten. I would be curious anecdotally, if I was a principal in one of those schools, how do our numbers fare versus even 3 to 6 years ago, knowing half-day kindergarten, and has that had a positive impact? I mean, these kids are, they're 5, 6, 7-year-olds. I mean, these are little people. I mean, some are even 4. That's a great point. Thank you, Rob. Some are even 4. So, I mean, these are really little people that we're talking about here. And I wonder how all-day kindergarten, I guess I would be looking at that. Anecdotally, I'm curious if it has improved our K-2 school numbers, just having that all-day kindergarten versus rush. So I just...
Anecdotally, I can go back a chapter to my intervention days, and I remember being so impressed and amazed with the way the kindergartners came in at the beginning of the year, and that was the first year of full day,
Right.
and where they left. And I'm thinking more ERLA, because as an interventionist at that time, I used the ERLA with my students. And it was amazing to see just the growth in the power words alone, that you had
Right.
so many kids leaving with, close to 60 power words, where as a former first grade teacher, way back in the day, you had kids coming into first with little or no power words.
Right.
So just from that anecdote, I found personally being immersed in a kindergarten class that year, I saw a lot of growth with them just in their, beginning reading skills.
Yeah.
But it is, I'm thinking even with the second step, it'll be interesting to see now and be able to watch it over time, with our kindergarten students getting those social and emotional skills at the beginning of their school career and really watching them through the 3 years. So definitely something to think
Yeah, I
about.
think those are all factors that, that improve the situation, but, obviously we all have work, but, sorry, Shona, go ahead.
No, gosh, I feel like I'm asking a lot of questions tonight. So I know that you all do social and emotional, but it sounds like you're really focusing on it this year with that partner teaching. I would be interested to see at the end of the year whether or not you found quicker growth having focused so strongly on social and emotional development in the beginning of the year. So I think, and I know you guys all do it. I know it's an important part of these curriculums for K-5. Actually for all of our students, but it sounds like you're really taking it a step further by focusing heavily on it. So I'm not saying this right. I would like to see your summation at the end of the year to see, because now this is how that impacts our students and whether or not that's something maybe we should be focusing on in the beginning of the year instead of putting such a heavy emphasis on our English language arts scores and our math scores. Maybe we should front load social and emotional learning at the beginning of the year at the earlier levels.
And the other piece to that was I was looking at some data that I had collected last year in terms of student referrals and some of the behaviors that were occurring in the school, and knew that this was really the time to do it as a whole school, to really make strides in terms of reducing the number of office referrals and really reducing the behaviors that occurred that would then lead to distractions from the content that was being instructed.
And it's kind of interesting because it's one of those things that we always talk about, right? We're always saying our children can't learn if they're in a disruptive classroom, if they're hungry. I mean, and these are all things that we say and we understand intellectually, but don't necessarily focus on practice-wise, not just because it's just not the focus, right? We're always worried about the scores. And you've taken it kind of a step further. And so I would really like to see the implementation and see how that changes things, because I think you have a real great opportunity here to have some empirical data that maybe will translate better to implementation.
And you'll see my 3-5 colleague, when she shares a little later, has some can also share how her whole school has embraced it and really moved forward with it. And again, thus far I've gotten positive feedback, and one thing that has been really going well is teachers say that it's consistent across the building in different parts from this room to that room. Everyone's using the same language, which I think is a huge advantage. So I'll definitely keep you posted.
Awesome.
I don't want to take too much more time, but as you heard me talk about, there's definitely a focus on climate and on building those positive supports for behavior and those skills that our youngest learners need. We too spend a lot of time in those grade level team meetings once a week, and we do a lot of analysis of data between, pulling up on the projector our ERLA scores and really kind of unpacking student by student, looking at those students that are below grade level, and like I mentioned earlier, coming up with a plan. So whether that means having the interventionist informally support, or using the instructional paras, or providing additional materials for the teacher coming out of the collaborative session, we really work to look at that data together as a group, as well as the formative assessments that they do on a day-to-day basis. we also utilize that grade level time to bring in our specialist. Again, scheduling is always tricky, but doing what we can to bring special ed in there so that they can have that chance to really work and collaborate with the grade level teachers as well as the interventionists to really be able to sit side by side and collaborate on student needs and helping students to move from where they are to the next particular skill of focus. We also are working hard on building those texts to support the current areas of focus in social studies and science. So looking at what materials we currently have, as well as we've taken some trips to our basement and really tried to resurface some of those treasures books, which there's a lot of nonfiction texts and treasures that are sitting there that are just ready to be used. So really trying to kind of look at what we have, look at what resources we have that we could sort of resurface and bring back to help support some of those social studies and science concepts. And certainly the ongoing collaboration with our science curriculum resource teacher. We're excited about tomorrow and really being able to move forward with her to help us with other science opportunities at the pre-K to 2 level. Any questions?
I just have one just overall question. Are we looking at a gap analysis between our students with special needs and those, our typical students, and will we be hearing that information?
Yes, that's part of the focus monitoring plan. So there'll be an update, but we're most likely that'll come after the first of the year because we want to have the second round of data because you don't want to just judge it on the first window.
No, but
So
I'd
we
be
want to look at
interested
that.
in seeing that.
Yeah. So that
In
was
one
the-
strategy from focus monitoring that we've been embracing and that we mentioned is the collaboration between special ed and general ed at the grade level meeting setting so that they can be part of that and have those conversations about specific students that both general ed and special ed are working in partnership with. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks,
you.
Christina. Okay, up next is Mary G. Fritz, Mary Poussin. Welcome, Mary.
Good evening. How's everybody?
Good, how are you?
Good. You haven't fallen asleep yet, so
No,
that's
no,
good.
no. Are you
Data's
kidding? We
exciting.
could go 4 hours.
I know.
We don't want to,
Well-
but we can, to be honest. We're only, oh, hush up.
So as we
can't help it.
shift
He has
over
an
to
attention
grades
span of
3 to
a gnat.
5, there is another set of data that we'll take a look at. Again, looking at our ERLA scores, one little fact I thought I'd throw out there, because this has been kind of a repetitive comment as we were looking at all the ERLA data. There is a typical pattern with students of regression and recoupment. A typical child will regress over the summer, and an average recoupment is usually between 4 to 6 weeks. So when we look at all the scores that you're seeing tonight from September, certainly we have to keep that in mind. The kids had, was it, I don't even know, 10 weeks last summer? And I know that there is an area that we all are concerned about when we're not in their space every day helping them to do the reading and practice their math. We know that that's going to, have a regression factor. So the key is getting them back in track and working daily to recoup that loss, which thankfully that does typically happen. So we'll see those scores as we move into December. So as you can see from my ERLA data, I have pretty much even in terms of at-risk and proficient and above, intervention numbers fall at 22%. Looking at our STAR scores, I'm proud to say that I have at least 50% of my students who are at the at or above benchmark. Our on-watch categories are definitely, minus the reading piece, are at a good range in terms of how many kids we have at those groups. And in the reading, as I look at our kiddos who are in the 29th percentile, that is a little higher than we'd like, but again, I feel that those numbers will absolutely move forward. We are a stronger school in math for sure. That I've seen not only with our STAR scores, but also with the SBA data, and SBA stands for Smarter Balanced Assessment. So the data that you're looking at is the data that was from our scores in April, May, when we took the assessment. So the cohort of kids, our current grade 3 kids are not part of this, and our 6th graders are actually the 5th grade that are represented here. So the assessment looks for us to get to a level 3, which is goal. A level 4 is advanced. So as you can see for Fritz, we had, oh, and I'm sorry, because it's dark on there, I just realized you can't really see the black. I was trying to differentiate it so you could see the difference. But for our district percentile, we were at 53% at a level 3 or 4 for reading, and Fritz School fell at the 54%. And for math, the district score was 46%, and Fritz fell at the 52%. There's work for us to be done, but I do feel pretty confident that we had some solid scores there for our 3 and 4 at least.
Jay, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was just a few minutes ago mentioned again that there's a summer effect, so that these are really not reflective of the true position of the children. We need information that's reliable. If this isn't, I mean, can we see the stuff from the end of last year or some point in time that we think really is reflective of where the students are?
I do like the idea when you mentioned.
We did
Right.
provide that data last year.
I didn't bring it with me tonight.
Yeah, no, that's
Can you tell us what it was?
I not off the top of my head,
Send it to
but
us
again, we could send it to you again. I think that again, the point that you're trying to stick a pin in, as from your point of view, is that you think that there's going to be a comparison. It's not. They're different students. They're at a different point in their learning progression. So I don't. While we could do that, and we'll be happy to share that data with you in your Friday packet to all the board members, I just would I would caution you to look at those numbers and try to project those out to this year, because they're at a different point in their progression of learning, because they're at a different grade level and there's different expectations. So I just wanted, because I know we gave that data to the board 2 years in a row, the last 2 years, because we've had ERLA now. This is really where we've been using this data for the 3rd year. So those scores, we always see the bubble, and this is the same phenomenon every year. And I think you've asked we've had the same questions
The
asked.
first couple of years I said, but it's new stuff, so we're just getting used to it.
But we've had the
It's
same
really not
phenomenon at the end of the
reflective.
year when we talked about it, was the fact that the data from the beginning year shows that students are needing improvement. The end of the year, the scores show that they're nearly on grade level if they're not all. The high percentage of are proficient. Usually it's about 65 to 75% are at proficient. Then we have the STAR scores, which kind of run in line, but they don't necessarily correlate, because remember, the STAR is a measure that's done computerized. It's a very short assessment. It's not testing there's necessarily the same nuanced aspects of especially reading development. Then we have the SBAC scores, and we try to triangulate the data, but they don't triangulate. And we went through this, there was a long presentation, I believe it was last year or the year before, with Carrie Laudadio and Christy Medancy, that went through the purposes of the data. So when you look at ERLA is about individual student growth, and I think that that's the key difference. So we could share it with you. I just don't want to.
Yeah, no,
it's
that's
not
okay.
that this
I
data
just-
is bad data. It's just that it's data at the moment that we're looking at it.
There's just two things I think we need to understand. One is a board. What portion of our students are where they should be and what portion are not? Right. And second, as a parent, that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when you mentioned they don't triangulate and all. But I think we need to be able to have a simple answer for a parent. If a parent wants to know, is my student on grade level or not, my child on grade level or not, we got to have something we can say, okay.
I think
then
it goes
this,
back.
we can't-
It goes back to what Christina Kiley was sharing about the power goals, and it was mentioned by Shauna, is that in ERLA there are power goals that are set for students, and the parent gets a document that is shared with them to explain where their child is and what opportunities there might be for growth. That's something that we are putting in place universally this year.
Sal, does it tell them if they're where
It does.
they should be or not?
Yeah,
or
it
grade
gives
level?
them.
Can somebody send me that so I can
Sure.
explain it to parents?
We
when
would
they've asked me?
really, actually, that'd be great. We could definitely send that to you, because we want to make sure that again, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm saying this in a very deliberate manner, because with this implementation, this launch, it's like anything else. You can't do everything at once. So we've been gradually putting it in place, and that there's a variety of reasons why I'm saying it this way, because we want to make sure that we had the fidelity of the implementation of ERLA, because it is a subjective assessment as has been brought out. So you have to have the calibration. So as teachers got more comfortable, some teachers did move to the Power Goal last year as a pre-launch group. Now this year it's universally expected that teachers will be putting in the Power Goals, and that'll be provided for parents. So we could definitely, I think you'll appreciate the data that comes from that and the help to parents, because your message, which I truly believe is core and so admirable, and it's what we're trying to do, is make sure that parents, if they ask the question, first of all, they shouldn't have to ask the question. We should be providing it for them anyway. And number two, that when they do get the information, that they understand what they're getting and they can figure out how we can help them or how they could help their child. So I think this year is the year that, because we're in the place where the different phases of the launch, just like anything else we've done, the expectation with that power goal being put in, which is a matter of a click of a button on the part of a teacher, and I know it's more than that, I'm sure, but the fact is that that one significant click of the button does provide so many layers of information for a family.
But I have to tell you, I ask parents every once in a while, right? I have yet to have somebody tell me they know how to determine whether their child's at level or not.
But
Well,
that's, can I answer that?
sure.
Just because, so, and like I said, I knew that not every student was getting it, but I was lucky enough to have a teacher that was doing it, is that it does say that. So it says on the sheet, it says, like, your student, and it's colors, which is a little confusing, but it has a thing that goes to it. So your kid is in 4th grade and is supposed to be, I'm just gonna pick a color because I don't have the chart in front of me, supposed to be reading it purple. Your kid is currently reading it green, okay? And this is what we need to move that child forward. So it tells you that all students should be at this point in their career reading within these levels. The sheet says that, but this is how you move your child along. And it's not overwhelming, and I feel like it's something that could have been. It could have been like, your kid needs to work on vocabulary, reading retention, responses, but it takes one item. And it's something that you get throughout the year, because in the past, the only opportunity to find out where your student is either through you being aggressive and emailing and getting that information, or parent-teacher conferences. Now, without request, you get this document home, and you can now work with your student on those particular things. And it changes, and every time, at least last year, every time my son did another assessment, and if he moved forward, or even if he didn't move forward in his reading goals, I was given another sheet that came home in his box that said, this is now what we're working on. So I kind of got it's like a regular progress report almost, in addition to parent-teacher conferences. It would be
I
nice
don't know
if we
why
had
none of
something
the
for
people that,
math.
you know, that I talked to are aware of it.
Because I don't think everybody got it. So it wasn't every teacher that was doing it, right?
And it's just my other huge concern, because I'm seeing it all the time now, is if these kids aren't mastering this stuff now, right? If they're not learning to read by, what do they say, it's 3rd grade, right? And the math fundamentals by 4th grade, then I am just so concerned that these kids are just destined to adult lives of low income and poverty. I mean, those jobs where those jobs that are low skilled now are just, they're minimal pay. And if these kids haven't mastered those fundamentals, they're not going to get anything more than those low skilled, no skilled jobs. It's just the rest of those are gone. And I'm seeing, as I've said before, I'm seeing plenty of opportunities for good paying jobs and careers, without having to be college graduates and beyond that and all, but just knowledge workers. But if they don't have this stuff, I mean, this, you were saying we're at maybe 65% by the end of the year. I think that's what you said, right? You
Yeah,
just said,
I
right
mean,
now
I think it's
50%
between,
of all
it
those-
was well
but
over
those other-
70%. It
Right,
was
over
between
70%,
65
but
to
those other-
75%.
But what happens to those other 30% of the kids? That portion of the 30% of the kids that have the capabilities of doing it. Those things, I think God love these people. Listen to the passion that every one of them has, and all the great ideas and the techniques and stuff that they're coming up with. But I think it's a bigger than issue than that. I think it's a board issue and it's a community issue.
Well, I think it's a
Really
national
gotta-
issue, Jay,
and it's a
because
national,
the
but
thing
what
is
can we
that,
do?
again, if you have students, as you saw tonight, that are coming in more than 12 months behind as kindergartners, okay, just giving them more, you could put them to school 24 hours a day for the whole year. They're not going to learn. There's a saturation point. So you have a variety of opportunities there that you have to investigate. And furthermore, we don't disaggregate out our special ed students from those numbers. We don't disaggregate out our EL students from those numbers. If you'd like to do that, we could do that.
No, that's why I was
Because
saying
then
that-
those numbers will go up.
No, that's why I was
They'll
saying
go up
that-
drastically, which is not necessarily appropriate because they're all members of our student
I'm not-
population.
what I was
So-
saying was that those that have the ability to do it.
But that's,
Right.
but
And-
that's, again.
And those that, and
But
and
Jay,
everybody
then
else
you're asking me
achieves
to,
their ability.
but you're asking me to disaggregate those
I'm not
kids.
asking you to do that
Because
also.
some
I'm
of
just
those,
telling you we
but some of those
shouldn't-
students don't have the ability.
I'm just saying that I believe we shouldn't pass any student on to the next grade that has not learned what they should have learned when they left the last grade.
And I
I'm saying
don't,
it's not I'm saying it's not an
but I don't think that
administrator issue. I'm
that's
saying it's not a-
necessarily, again, I think that we've had, I know this conversation's been for a few years, but I don't think, and many of the same people were in the room when we talked about kindergarten, and we talked about retention of kindergarten and the practices. I think, again, that the students, it's about the growth of a student, and it's about the student being on level at that point, but then when they start the next year, you're going to see there's a difference because they have different expectations.
Right.
So I think we can look at the data. I do think, though, as much as you're not asking for it, I do think we should disaggregate some of this data for you. Well, I think you need to see I think everybody needs to see the full picture, because I think that it's a very different landscape, as I mentioned earlier, that will help better understand. Not that we're trying to say certain students can't or will never do things, can or can't and will never do things. It's just that we need to see the picture, we need to see it painted in the right way. So,
Yeah, and I'm just saying that, again, this is not my field, but the one that I heard that seems to make a lot of sense is you learn to read through third grade, and after that you read to learn. If these kids can't, if they're not at third grade level, when they learn third grade to read, they ain't gonna learn. Right, they're not gonna be able to learn the rest of the material at a level that they need to after that, because now they're reading to learn, right?
no,
And the same thing,
none
I'm
of us
sure,
are
with
in
the math in
disagreement.
fourth
None
grade.
of us are
So,
disagreement with
that's-
that,
so
but
I'm not saying that it's a superintendent issue. It's surely not a principal issue. That's why I'm saying it's a board level. It's a community issue. Do we really, as a community, or is it okay for us to pass these kids on when we know, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I am sure that if they do, they're gonna have extremely difficult economic lives as adults. Those jobs don't exist. They're gone if you don't have those skills, if you haven't mastered those fundamental skills.
Mike, did you have a question?
Quick question, unless I'm misreading something.
And then I'll get you, Shauna.
Under the STAR scores, you don't separate it by grade level. like
Yeah,
this.
I have that same question.
I see other 3-5 schools have done it the same way.
Right.
Mine is-
That was my same, where in,
So the STAR scores, that's a combination of the entire building. So it's
Right.
3 through 5.
yeah.
Why didn't you just-
Why does K2 break it out by K1, 2, but 3-5 schools do it by the school? I have that same question.
I don't think there's any specific, right.
on the slide because we have 3 data points to share.
Because I think that's a really critical.
Sure.
Yeah,
So we just kind of.
yeah,
Because you added S back.
Right.
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 But I still think I don't know, I would like to see the 3, 4, 5.
I mean, as a parent that had, my sons are now 22 and 24, but I had at one of my children who I was a terrible reader, K through 2, really slow, and I remember the principal saying, oh, give it till the end of third grade, give it to the end of third grade. And you know what, by mid-4th grade, he was spot on, the interventions used, he was spot on. I think that is really critical. Again, third graders, they're really little people. I mean, I think that would be helpful for your school and for your.
We do have that data.
Yeah, I'm sure,
We do.
okay, yeah, I'm sure you do.
Honestly, I can tell you, we definitely have
I would be
looked at
curious
that.
to see what it does look like at the end of third grade and then compared to 4th to 5th. I appreciate the formatting can be a challenge, but,
But I like the S back too. I like that.
right, I do too. But I was actually looking forward to seeing that because as a parent that experienced it firsthand, and it was shocking how just that intervention, that pull-out intervention of the reading coach made all the difference in the world and got him the confidence and the skill base that he needed.
And typically, when you look at the trend data from grades 3 through 5, you'll see that predominantly the students in grade 3 are the ones that are more in your intervention
Right.
level.
That would be that's
Right.
where my curiosity would be compared
that
to my
does
our 4th and 5th graders.
typically
That would be
shake out.
important because I'll even give them that wiggle room between 3rd and 4th grade.
Absolutely.
But by the end of 4th grade and 5th grade, the wiggle room's over. Those are scary. Those are the scary situations that I think. But yeah, go ahead, Shauna.
So and I'm not sure if it's necessarily for you guys or for Dr. Menzo, but we were talking about how some of the kindergartners coming in are 4 years old, right? And I know that there is a distinct difference between a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old as far as, just hand ability and ability to do a variety of different things, sitting still, for example. I was wondering if we track the progress of our younger students and have any way to compare it to the kids that entered kindergarten, let's say at 5, to see, is there like a leveling off point, or does it permanently, coming in so young, leave you behind the curve? I just, out of curiosity.
We haven't tracked that. We could, I think we could probably go back into Power School and look
Okay.
at that data. Because there is definitely, that's a state statute. That's not a, we know,
Right,
but
but
I just want to
also-
clarify that.
Yeah,
first,
no,
Ben.
I know
So-
that, but I would just be curious, because we're putting a lot of emphasis, or we have, over being able to, when you're in 3rd grade, read at 3rd grade, and 4th grade, read at 4th grade. But this isn't coming out right because of my brain, but if we have these kids coming almost a full year younger, I know they're not exactly a full year younger, right? But they're reaching the end of 3rd grade almost a full year younger.
Correct.
So I would be curious as to whether or not those students are
In-
in that area, just for education.
No,
I know that
I
it's
think
state
that's a
statute
great-
and we can limit or whatever, but it would be an interesting fact.
That's a
Well,
great question.
You know what else would be interesting, since we've beefed up the number of seats we have for pre-K, what does that look like? And what are those kids, to track those kids, that extra,
Yep.
however 100 kids we now are servicing at 3 and 4, what's that gonna do for us?
We have begun through central office looking at our data, not just for preschool but also our special education students, in a little bit more granular fashion through the preschool data.
Yeah.
Because the preschool now, we don't necessarily just have the integrated program, as you said. We have the other programs.
Right.
And some of our students have to be diverse. Those other classrooms in Smart Start have to be diverse with variety of populations represented. So that data now going into the 3rd year, we're really trying to hone in on that.
Yeah.
But the whole idea of the students coming earlier, that is a very good point, and we could take a look at that data. The challenge again, though, and I don't want to sound negative, but if you have a student who's coming to us already a year behind, it's really, and I don't know the data, I don't know the research on this, but I know there's far smarter people in the room to help me with this, or potentially get it to you, to get that student caught up for that year. It's not just about holding the student back another year, because the fact is that it's only going to continue to compound. So the fact is that, and I see one of our preschool teachers who's doing a lot of graduate work in this area, has done a lot of graduate work in this area, shaking her head and smiling. So it's just a quandary, because not that we're trying to, no one, and I know the board doesn't believe this, no one is shirking their responsibility, but you have that gap, and that initial gap is the most difficult gap to make up. And if the students are already coming with that initial year gap or even 6-month gap, it is very, very difficult. And I think that's if somebody can solve that, they'd be multi-billionaire, because it's not just, it's been there for a long time. And we all know that hasn't changed from we were probably in school. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse, but that's the biggest challenge, because holding a student back doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get that extra year of growth. So when do they progress? And you could have a student who is, if they're a year behind, and again, the expectations for that following year change. So if they're a year behind leaving 1st grade, now then 1st grade expectations are actually a year and a half ahead of them. And then the 2nd grade expectations, when they go to leave 1st grade because they can't leave yet, are now 2 years ahead of them. When do they chronologically, how do you move them? That's the, well, that's a quandary.
It shouldn't be chronological, right?
Well, no, true. But again, for the student who is going to be able to make up that gap, and there are students who, and the gap, because the gap isn't as wide, but for the students whose gap is huge because of a variety of impacting factors, that's going to be the challenge. So I think, I was whispering, and I didn't mean to, but on this a sidebar with Laura as our special ed director, saying, okay, well, we could pull this up, but just, the number of special ed students in our district is close to 900 students, 800 or something students. So right there, that's over 15% of our population. So now if you take those, and not that I'm looking to do that on this data, but if you take those 45% or 52% and not assuming that every student who's special ed, we shouldn't assume that every student who's special ed doesn't meet mastery. But the fact is that we also know from our focus monitoring data that they're less likely to meet it at the time that they're scheduled to meet it. Those numbers are impacted in a similar fashion with our EL. So I think, again, and we've tried to avoid doing that, and not because of any other reason, is that we hate to pull out groups. But I think that the point, this conversation is I always love these conversations because I think they do help us all process. And I think it's almost a disservice not to share that data, not in a way that we're setting one group against the other, because that's not my intent, and I know it's not anyone's intent in this room, but just to at least share that picture. And it will come out when we do the focus monitoring data in January, but I think it's easy data to pull because the state has gotten better, which is a positive. So sorry to go on, but I just felt that was important, and I apologize.
I just do want to make a comment about our population of students that do come in at 4. I have a son who's turning 21 at the end of this month, and I held him out. And I have to say, after 24 years of teaching the classroom grades K to 5, if we looked at this data and we pulled out all those babies that started school because parents didn't know they had the opportunity to have their child have another year outside of school.
Or they couldn't keep them out for
Because-
financial
correct.
reasons.
And
That's a
I
big
know
piece of it.
it was a cost on my end, but it was a cost that I chose and made happen for my family. But I think the state is doing us a disservice by not adjusting that timeline, because I do believe
That's a
families
good point.
would find ways to make it work. But some of these kids are coming in at 4, 4.5, and
Yeah.
they truly are at a disadvantage for being so young.
And if they're the ones that have to come because of financial
Mm-hmm.
reasons, they're the ones most likely to be subject to the 1 million word gap coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And research shows that 1 million word gap,
Yep.
folks that don't have the means to be able to provide, that they can't,
Right.
through no fault of their own.
No,
Yeah.
we used
So
to.
I'm gonna,
Sorry.
you're gonna wait your turn, sorry, Kathy, and then I'll get
And
you,
on
Shauna.
that note, I personally lived it. Back in the day, when I started school, the cutoff day was February 1st, which was my birthday. So I entered kindergarten as a 4th grader who didn't turn 5 until February 1st. And the part I think that gets missed, and the thing that stuck with me, even right through high school, was not so much the academics, but the social emotional.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah, good point. Shauna?
Now, we used to have the option as parents to keep your kindergartner back. Is that still an option in district?
We do have some, I don't think it was never I think it always was based on whether or not the student was recommended, and I think then there was conversation. We do have the process that the board saw about, I'm going to say it was 3 years ago, where they have to go through the process to identify where the student is, and then there's a process that they work with the administrator at the building. So it does happen. It definitely does happen. I know we've had students stay back in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, going on. So there are students who do get retained.
Yeah,
There's a process that we follow as a district.
I was talking about something different though, because my husband was.
Do you mean the T1 program or the
It was
transition
a
program?
kindergarten something.
It was-
yeah.
No, it was my son was the last class that did it.
Okay.
So basically it was like in February his birthday's December 26th. Okay, so he was tested when he was 4, but the year he turned 5, no way was he emotionally, socially ready for kindergarten, and they put him in that transition program.
That's what it is,
So they were like 2 or 3, one on each side of town, and they scooped up, those kids and made those classes for those. So he really started a year later, in essence. Based on his birth date, should have graduated. He really became a 93 instead of a 92.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But there was no discussion. It was obvious he wasn't ready.
But we don't have that anymore.
No, we don't. We do.
That's been
Gone.
I don't-
My son
at
is
least
24.
how many,
25.
10, 12 years ago?
Yeah.
12?
So that was in 1997, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Roughly.
Is that a program we think about considering again, or was there a reason? There's always a reason we get rid of stuff.
I wasn't on the board
you
then,
know?
I don't know, I
Okay,
can't
well, I
speak to
don't know.
that.
Wasn't
I
there.
wasn't that.
I can speak to it.
Okay, and then I'll get Jay after that if you want.
We had a number of levels, and it got very confusing
Okay.
because we had pre-K, K, transition first. You didn't know. You could
Yeah.
conceivably
That's right, it wasn't
spend-
transition, it was pre-K.
Yeah,
It was a
you
pre-K
could
program.
conceivably spend
then
quite
they did a
some
transition.
time in those early grades. and it
Right,
was
you're
becoming a
8 and you're
real
in grade
issue.
1, you know?
Yeah, so
I mean,
that's.
I'm not making a
I was
term.
back on the board when that occurred, and there were reasons why that was discontinued.
Okay. Yeah, Jay,
Yeah, we used to have readiness assessments.
well,
where
that's
the
what
kids-
determined, that's what.
Right, right. Do we have those anymore? Oh, we do. So a parent in all the.
Wait, let me just before clarify. So in terms of kindergarten, they come in for their kindergarten orientation. There is an assessment. It's not a pencil paper assessment. It's more of the teacher sit down. They have a checklist type of inventory. So it's not where they're taking a reading assessment or a math assessment. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't know what they're supposed to.
But isn't
What
that
they're
even like
supposed to know,
gross
reading
and
or
fine
writing.
motor skills? A lot of it's
Yeah,
that
it
kind of
was
stuff
more-
too.
They used the Gazelle back then, right, as a testament. But is there something where we do some screening to assess whether the child is ready to begin kindergarten or not? And then ready to begin, I don't know when you next. But wouldn't we want to,
Because if they come to kindergarten, there wouldn't be an option if there was no other program to say.
They have to be there.
well, we have pre-K,
Yeah,
I
that's a
thought we
good
have
point.
pre-K.
Well,
Pre-K is a limited number of slots.
And they're not.
But-
They aged out.
But
So,
wouldn't we want to, wouldn't we want to not start kids if they're not ready to
but
start?
we don't have we don't have a right to say to a parent that if your child is able to go to kindergarten, that they can't go to kindergarten. We can't do that.
No, but it's a right? What they used to do was a recommendation that the child wasn't ready to start.
Yes, and I think we get some of that data based on social emotional, because I know it's a very simple inventory, but I don't think that we are in a position where we can say, I think times have changed. I'll just leave it
No,
at that.
but the damage
Times
is
have
still
changed.
there, right? I mean, we were just talking about the gap, and the gap gets
True.
wider, and the gap gets, so why would we want to allow them to do that?
Well, because
Or why would we not want to inform the parents?
The other concern is that if you have a child out there that needs to be in school, early intervention is better than no intervention. So keeping a child home doing the same thing is far worse than bringing.
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if they're not, I follow that, but then if, let's say, they get through kindergarten and now they're gonna go to first grade, I know we're doing some learning in kindergarten, but you're doing even more learning in first grade. So now the end of the kindergarten year, they're not ready to go to first grade, what happens?
They
Do we hold many of them back in kindergarten or hold many of them in kindergarten? No, but do we?
I wouldn't say many, but we look at the child's growth, we look at the age, we do something called the Lights Retention Scale to see if they're a good candidate for retention. We talk to the family about their feelings about it, because in my experience, if the family's not on board, it doesn't work. Because kids can tell whether their families feel like they failed or not.
The ripe age of 5.
But that's why I'm saying, I think it's much more of a board and a community issue, really. But to pass them on when they're not at level
Vicki,
is
did
really,
you?
their futures are dismal.
Yeah. Vic?
Their
I just
futures
wanted
are
to say,
dismal.
another part of this conversation, we need to look at the partnership between home and school. We, as administrators, we work hard to reach out to families, we send a lot of things home, a lot of suggestions, come to our curriculum nights, whatever. We don't get everybody, and we also don't get a lot of parents who, for homework, at least in my school, they'll have reading, 15 minutes every night, and there's a little sheet that has to come home. It doesn't come back to school. So making sure that parents understand that they have an important role to support our efforts here at school can't be understated. And that,
Right.
I don't know
That's what I
what we
mean.
would do to
That's what I mean,
make
that's
that
why
happen.
you're right, that's
but-
why I'm thinking, it's really, I think, a board issue and a community issue. How far do we wanna take this in terms of parents' awareness that the child is behind and what we see the consequences of that to be? You know, should there be like conferences, required conferences with parents?
We have,
And then, you know, and early on, and then it gets, just like you're doing the assessments here, right? Should the parents have to be involved periodically?
Well,
You know, and by law, I know you can't pick them up and make them commit.
Again, I think
But-
that there's elements of this, just some basic things. We do have the conferences, which the elementary parents, each teacher is required, or I shouldn't say required, but they do meet with every parent. In addition, as soon as the student has been identified having areas of concern, they move into the early intervention process, or SRBI process. That is documented meetings at which the parent is made aware and is brought into those meetings, so they're understanding where the child might be, either academically or socially, emotionally behind. And then intervention occurs.
Well, that would be interesting, for us to track what portion of the parents become involved, actually come to those meetings or involved.
Well, those meetings, they're about their children, so they're more invested. It's more of the ancillary activities that we offer to support them, that the involvement might not be as strong with those particular families. So the actual ones, I think we have very good parent involvement with parents that know that their child needs support. I don't think we have parents who deny those meetings or don't come to those meetings. It's just the other layers of support that they might not avail. So there is a tracking potentially there.
So I guess the thought that gives me, I'm sorry.
that's okay. Nope, go
I
ahead.
guess the thought that gives me is we have all these action plans up here for what the principals are gonna do with their teachers. Sure seems to me we should have action plans for the parents. So
Well,
if a
you can't
student
force
fall-
parents
you
to,
can't force-
yeah,
I
I
understand
mean,
you
I,
can't. I understand you can't, but we can certainly create expectations. In our job, if we really view it's important, vital for this, part of our mission is to assure that our students have a solid understanding of these fundamentals, then I think that we would then want to be doing all that we can do. We can't legally cause them to do anything, but make sure that we're communicating as much as we can. What the fact that if the student isn't at level, the fact that they're not, and what the parents, we really believe the parents need to be doing to help us. Because as I was saying, it's gotta be a partnership.
right.
And if
Cal-
they decide not to, then they don't, but something that gets communicated to the parents, and what we believe their responsibility is, or what they need to be doing, as often as we're reporting these test scores to the schools.
So Jay, as I understood it, I think that's exactly what Shauna was pointing out, was that the documentation is being sent home. And indicating clearly, I think, to the parents that these are the things your kids need to be working on, and that means you at home as well as
Right.
during the school day. So I think those documents are exactly what you're
And
You're
just to
speaking to.
clarify, the documents are not universally going out at this point.
Oh, okay.
That's the
Maybe- well,
process
maybe
that
Yeah,
we're moving
and that's-
towards.
Yeah.
And that's the part that we're, I just want to clarify,
Yep,
because
okay.
I don't want to send the wrong message to anyone that leaves tonight thinking I didn't get my documents. Well, you might not have, because it's part of the many layers of the phase-in. I do want to say that I think there's a tremendous amount of what you're saying, Jay, that we're already, I don't know what I don't want to say that there's always room for improvement, but I think that with the layers of intervention that are in place and the expectations of our interventionists and the outreach that they have to those parents and the groups that they bring them in, we're starting a free family literacy program, from throughout the town, that I mentioned at one of our recent board meetings. There's a tremendous amount of outreach. So I think that maybe one of the things that we should help board members as well as community understand is just to chronicle just in a very quick way that if your child, and I think we even have documents, if your child has a reading issue or a math challenge, what are the stages and what are the supports that are in places? We should just share that again with the board, because there are so many layers that the board has supported that we didn't have many, like even 5 years ago, never mind this year.
Okay, so I'm going to be a bit of a taskmaster. I'm sorry, because I have to be true to what everybody committed to, and I don't want to short cycle other principals. I mean, if you want one quick comment, I'm not shutting you down, Jay, but
I think this is the biggest issue since I've been on the board.
it certainly is.
And I think in that one, because I think times have changed so much. And again, if these kids don't master these things.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all in
Well,
agreement on
and
that.
to-
I
and
don't
just-
think there's any
yeah,
argument
and my-
there.
So I think it's a matter of really, it's really taking a fresh look at the responsibilities and communication. And we talked about, so we tell them, well, it seems to me that maybe they're not aware of what the consequences of them not being at level are, right? What do we believe is gonna happen if the child can't read effectively by the end of 3rd grade, doesn't know the math fundamentals by the end of
Right.
4th grade? And what is literature and whatever else shown the effect is of that child when they become an adult and for their adult lives?
It's true.
Because
Okay.
they don't do it at the end of 3rd grade, doesn't mean they can't do it by the end of 4th grade. Some kids just take a little bit longer.
I get
And all
it.
these things that we're doing will help them get to that point, hopefully.
A lot of them still
I
aren't
wouldn't
doing it
write
by
them
the end
off,
of
though.
5th grade.
Huh?
A lot of them still aren't doing it by the end of 5th
Right,
grade.
but we're trying to find ways of changing that. That's what we're here for tonight. The interventions that we're trying to use with these scores, hopefully will correct that. That's what we have to hope for.
Right, Mike, but I think, but those kids can't slip through the cracks.
No.
That's what I'm saying, I think things have
I
to
think
be
we're
done
all
now,
on
and I
that
think
same
they're
page.
doing all they can do.
Yeah.
I think unless I think the communication needs to be the parents, but again, more the consequences. What do we believe is gonna happen if they don't get there?
It is a good point.
And I think that's all we can do in a role.
That is all you can do.
And we got, and all the resources, and I know these folks do it, they make them aware of the resources that are available, and I don't know if there's any more that can be done to communicate that, but I'm just seeing it all the time now. If these kids don't have it, unfortunately, they're at the most $15 an hour jobs.
Right.
And they go in 10, 15 years later, same thing.
Yep.
There's nowhere to go.
Okay, so let's get back on focus. Mary, how you doing? You want to go,
I'm going to give it in a nutshell.
yeah, that's fine.
Honestly,
Let's go.
our
I want to give you
focus
your
in the
due time.
building started from just where are people located. I restructured the classrooms in terms of having intervention and special education in the same location, so resources are accessible in the same area where the kids are working by the grade level. So that was the key over the summer, to start with that. Then rolling into my scheduling and making sure that all the key players that I need at our weekly collaboration meetings are there. We have special ed, we have EL, we have our intervention teachers, classroom teachers, and coaches. Having all the experts that we have in the building together, looking and really refining what are the areas that kids are struggling in, not just looking at the data themselves in terms of how did they score in math, but really drilling down to what areas in math are they struggling with, what areas in reading are they struggling, who is the expert that could give us support, because I think we do a really good job with our special education and our intervention students. Where we struggle the most is our tier 1, which is in the classroom. It is helping teachers when they have a student come through the door that really has a struggle with fluency, or maybe it's problem solving, and they just may not either have the resources or the knowledge of how to tap into that for that child. As we sit at our grade level meetings, those are the conversations we're having every week. It is having an assessment given and bringing in our experts, whether it's the coach, whether it's our intervention teacher, special ed, looking and calibrating the scores and talking about how students perform. So it is really a heavy focus on talking about our kids constantly. How are we helping them move forward? And we do that through our weekly intervention and collab meetings, our SRBI meetings, core meetings, which we do have parent involvement. We do reach out a lot. So I feel really strongly that if we have a solid basis from which we are looking at our kids carefully, and we have lists of names, how is this one doing, how's that one doing, how do they perform on this next assessment, not just academic, but our social and emotional kids as well. So that's the key for us at Fritz School, is really looking at how do we embed all of our expertise and resources and put it in the right direction of helping our students progress.
Great. Any other questions for Mary or the Mary and Mary G. Fritz School? Sorry. I'm not trying to make a joke here. Okay, next is Christina Sagnello over at Parker Farms. Welcome.
Thank you. Mary took the words right out of my mouth, and as I was sitting there nodding my head, I kept hearing over and over again the concept of tiered instruction. And so tier one, really what's happening in our classrooms and how are we supporting our teachers, because it's about the teaching and the learning. And so making sure that best practices are really happening in the schools, in the classrooms every day. And so the data is here, and as you can see at Parker Farms, the data looks pretty similar across the board. We do have 16% in the emergency level for our ERLA, and that is combined, grades 3, 4, and 5, with, my numbers are very small, I apologize, 39% and 45% at proficient. For our STAR, we do have 49% proficient for reading and 60% for math, but then again, still 30% for the intervention and 22% for math. Our Smarter Balance assessment looks pretty average, and compared against the district, I was pleased with that. Still work to be done. But when we take the students that are in front of us every year, and it's in my school this year, our fourth graders are way at a higher performing level than my third and my fifth. So sometimes it's not always that progression, it's really that makeup of that class that's in front of you. And my first question always is with my teachers, how old is that child? Because I am a big believer in that. And so when we boil down to those collaborative meetings, when we're all sitting together, and we also at Parker Farms have created opportunities for the special ed teachers at every grade level. If they're working predominantly with third grade, they're at that third grade collab meeting. The ELL and bilingual teacher, if they are working with that grade level, they are also there, and the interventionist that works with them. Conversation is the key. We need to converse about the teaching, and we need to converse about the learning. Bringing student work, looking at math and literacy, not just one or the other. And then when the student doesn't respond, going into the tiered phases. So really looking at the intervention. Is it time to move this child into a tier 2? Are they or aren't they responding? And if they're not, how do we increase the frequency of what we're putting in front of them? And so that's where you hear those pieces of connecting home and homework. And let's look at that ERLA data and pull it apart. And is it the phonics, or is it the comprehension question? What kind of comprehension question? Is it literal? Is it inferential? And drilling down so that every person that crosses paths with that student, to the point where I was running around with the words for my PE teacher and my art teacher and my music teacher to say, these are more or less what we would call sight words. The students need to read them in the SNAP. Can you work them into your lessons? So having creative ways to bring that increase of frequency of this exposure to the students. The other piece that I just wanted to mention, we're fortunate enough, and I think that it absolutely can happen in the K-2 world too, is that personal goal setting for our students. So some of our STAR scores come out a little flat. The students take them on the computer, and often when we reflect with the students and say, is this really your best work, or what do you need to work on, that power goal, even for ERLA, having them own it and having them goal set, that is absolutely an important factor for our students in 3-5. We not only have all of this great work that's happening in the academics. I'm so proud of our teachers who I brought last year to the school the experience of satellite classrooms, where I'm a huge advocate for the coaches in the building. I'm blessed that I had years under my belt as a literacy coach and no instruction. But if I didn't, I would need to rely on them, and I'm wishing that I had them all the time in my building to really help drive that instruction. They work hand in hand. They go into the classrooms. The satellite classroom experience is where we have one third grade teacher, one fourth grade teacher, and one fifth grade teacher who open up their classroom, work collaboratively with the coach, co-plan a lesson. I just sat in on the co-planning of math. This year we're focusing on math on Friday, and then they will co-teach a lesson where we will bring the other teachers in to watch and really create that opportunity to strengthen and embed that instruction in tier 1.
I'm sorry, I just didn't really understand that.
Sure.
So you said you had a third, a fourth, and a fifth grade teacher meet, right? And then so is the third grade teacher partnering with the fourth and fifth grade teacher and teaching class together? Is that what you're doing?
They meet with the math coach and or the literacy coach, depending upon the cycle. So and then I'm sitting in with them, listening, and they plan a lesson that will then be taught in front of their other grade level partners. So they're co-planning with.
They're planning to teach their teachers.
Yes.
Teachers. Okay, thank you.
And really, it's to bring back that conversation about best practices and what are we noticing students doing. And then this year, we're also looking at not only really being clear with our learning objectives, but also working in that formative assessment. So really working with teachers, how do you collect that data and look at what students know, so then you can have those conversations to make sure that your planning is effective, because there is double the gap for those students that are below, and there's a lot of work to do. So when we can have the resources like the interventionist, the special ed teacher, the coaches, the principal, and their grade level partners all around the table talking about a cluster of students, slowly we hope to see change happen. So we're excited about that.
Just one quick question. I mean, Parker Farms has traditionally been the school that had the greatest diversity.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the Moses Y?
No, not most, usually Parker Farms. How many different languages do you have now?
We have only 8 as of right now, but we do have a high population of Spanish-speaking students. So when I heard Vicky say 13, I thought, wow. So we do have about 37 students in our bilingual ELL program. So predominantly Spanish-speaking, but a combination Mandarin and Pakistan, and so, but not as many. The other piece, just to add on, we have really strengthened our SRBI process this year, and so when a student is not making the strides that they should, coming together and saying, why keep doing the same thing that we're doing? We need to pull our resources and look and try a different strategy. And so once again, we're happy to see that at the grade level, and then at the core level where we have social workers and counselors sitting around the table. And finally, something that's not up there, when we heard Christina talk a lot about Second Step, I'm very proud to say that our school has been now in year 4 of Second Step implementation. This is our second year of what we call full implementation. Last year we started with the day 6 lesson co-taught, every single staff member except for my custodian and office clerks and secretary are co-teaching, so we were able to pull everyone to co-teach, and just to put the value on the importance of that social emotional curriculum. We do have monthly family town meetings, hence why I'm wearing this t-shirt today. We had one for our kindness campaign and launching it, and when we have those family town meetings, we highlight the Second Step lesson that was taught by grade level. So 2 fourth grade teachers, were up there today sharing what their students had learned, and then we tied it in with a community connection. So I'm really proud of the work that's happened in that area and maintaining it. We are really focusing on that instructional piece to build the teaching and learning.
So how have your families reacted to that, as far as parent participation in your school? Is it more anecdotal? I don't want to hold you to any numbers. But.
No, so we, in our climate survey, we added on a few extra questions this past year that directly related to the parents' knowledge of our social emotional curriculum of Second Step. There are home links, which is not an actual computer link, it's actually a piece of paper, that after the lesson happens, the students take that home link home, and they have a few days or a week to follow up and share that concept, and there's an activity that they do at home with the families. And I have asked all of the teachers, as part of their reflection this year, is to make sure that they are celebrating and publicizing what's happening in Second Step. When we have 30% of our student population, students and families that are still saying, yes, there are students that are mean to my child at school, I need to see that decrease. And so we need to celebrate and talk about what's happening in the school and celebrating it. During our family town meetings, we do invite the families in of the 2 classes that present. And then every week when I do send a newsletter out, we highlight some piece of it. So we are really trying to make it known what's happening, and that parents can also use that language at home.
Great. Anybody else? Questions? Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, up next, Danielle Belizzo from Pond Hill. Welcome, Danielle.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. So I just want to kind of highlight some of the things here for Pond Hill and some of the data that we have. So the numbers are kind of small up there, but if you take a look at our ERLA data for the fall, you can see that we've got 10%, almost 11% of our students in the intervention range. We do have 45% at risk and 43% proficient. So we did spend some time, as I go through the rest of these, we did spend some time at grade levels, like my colleagues have mentioned. We do spend a lot of time looking at all of this data. and analyzing it as we go through. Our STAR scores, if you take a look at our reading, proficient, we have 52% for the whole school, and for math, we're at 65%. So a good start for us. We still have a ways to go. If you take a look at our intervention bands there, for reading especially 25%, and then 14% for math. So for us, really, our big focus, even though my colleagues have mentioned it, it's kind of similar in terms of looking at data. We spend a lot of time at our grade level meetings, at our staff meetings, looking at the data we have, looking at the instructional implications that come from that, and then what can we do to meet all of the needs of these students. So what materials do we have? What resources do we have? How do we group our kids? We're finding that scheduling, we want to make sure we get to all of our kids and we provide that small group instruction, whether it's in reading or in math, because I think that's key. Whether they qualify for intervention or not, we still need to be meeting with those kids and beefing up our Tier 1 instruction. So that's kind of where we're looking as a district, and I mean as a school right now, is what can we do to meet the needs of all of our learners? So really making it personalized and specific to what they need, while still communicating it with the parents so that they know where we are and what we're working on here so they can support us at home. I think we've spent a lot of time as a school really looking at our special ed population, our EL population, our students that are in intervention, and kind of coming together. I meet with them once a month to kind of talk about what are you doing in small group, what can the classroom teacher be doing that's similar to carry it over and reinforce so we're all on the same page. So they're all getting that same instruction consistently, even though they're going to different places to get it. So it's all consistent, and so it's really helping them grow as we move through. Those are some of the bigger highlights. We do start this year, we did start Second Step with our some of our classes. We kind of take that along through our responsive classroom that we've been continuing to kind of boost up our social emotional needs and make sure we have a big impact there. So that's kind of where we are in a nutshell.
Any questions for Danielle or Pontiel?
My kid goes there.
Yeah,
I
so
talk,
you're
I see her
right.
all the time.
Fourth thing.
It's at least once a week.
Okay, Danielle,
Thank
thanks. Bringing up the rear, Rock Hill. How are you, Anthony? Anthony DeGenero's up.
They saved the best for last name.
Thank you very much.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Good.
So I know a lot of this data looks very similar to what you've been seeing from the 3-5 colleagues. Rock Hill's early data, the 48% at or above proficient, 42% at risk, and right now 9.3% at the emergency level and going forward. And we're taking the same steps, analyzing that data as we go, really focusing in on those power goals, especially about figuring out what the next step is and grouping those students appropriately, as all my teammates have said. And as you look at the STAR scores going the same way, kind of very similar to past schools you've looked at. Go ahead. So kind of what you're seeing is really that focus and that we talked about with 3-5 is on that Tier 1 instruction and really beefing that up and finding a way to close those gaps in those tiers without just jumping into looking at some specialized programming or specialized instruction, but really finding a way to get that in the classroom setting by combining our interventionists, our EL teachers, our special ed teachers, really to combine together to talk about all of those students and the great strategies that they can utilize in that instructional practice. I know a lot of teachers are also utilizing and starting to move a lot more towards those math station type groups and getting away from just standing and teaching to everyone as a whole, but really implementing this group needs this group needs this, and allowing for that growth. And I do want to emphasize as well that we're trying to instill that motto of every student's entitled to a year of growth, and we don't want to leave behind also those students, as you saw, 65% already at or above, but making sure that they have the opportunity in those individualized learning to get exposed to things that they are able to access and grow as well. Because as we pull in all the students who might have a gap, we want to also include every single student for that growth. So we're really working on tiering that instruction so that all levels get that exposure and everyone's on the same track. And that's really where we are in comparison. Same with the other 3-5s.
Any questions for Anthony?
Just a comment.
Yeah, please, Shona.
I do not envy the job you guys have.
No, that's the truth.
Because just listening to the accumulating data and assessing the data and it's a lot of work. So I commend all of you for the jobs that you're doing and the leadership you're giving to your teachers. And I really do think that you guys and the teachers are where the rubber meets the road, and this is where we'll gain the most traction. And it's going to take a while, but I think that what you're doing now is going to show up 10 years down the road on our SAT scores and stuff like that. We're just not seeing it yet. So thank you.
Okay.
If I could just comment, going back to the data, and I just want to make sure that we also remember that tonight was about, these school improvement plans are helping set goals for teachers this year and administrators this year. So using last year's data, while it would be good to help maybe tell the story, that data is not pertinent to those goal setting sessions. So I just think that was something that I neglected to mention earlier, because school improvement plans are set in the year for the year that we're in, not looking backwards. So that's why this data at this time, teachers have to set their goals by November 15th, and so do administrators. So you would set that based on the students they have in front of them and the data they have from those students this year. So I wanted to clarify that. But I too, like Shauna just said, I would like to thank our administrators. The growth of this team over the years is incredible in terms of their knowledge and their understanding of assessment data, as well as just good instruction. And I think that continues to be our opportunity that we continue to investigate, making sure that Tier 1 classroom instruction is at the highest level possible. And I think times have changed. Times have changed because of demographics. And I think that we have really, it would have been easy, which might have been the way many, many years ago, for us to not present the data that doesn't look good. Many districts don't present the data that doesn't look good. They present the data that looks really good, or you could actually manipulate the data, as we all know, to make it look good. So to present it in the way that we did tonight, I think this is what the board would expect of us. And I think that's the expectation in terms of who we are as a team and who my administrators are and who our teachers are. So there is room for growth. I believe that there's definitely a path on which that we have charted our course and that we will continue. But I guess the other thing is that I think we need to be true to is making sure that we do get the information that was requested. That's good for us to look at. But also to, as Rob offered, and I know we have in the past, to provide more frequent opportunities to review this, because I think we don't want it to be an annual phenomenon that shocks people. It's not about shock and awe. It's really about making sure that there's that progress and moving forward in that regards. And I do appreciate the board support, and I know our administrators do, and I'm sure our teachers do too, in your support of them continuing to really provide as much detailed information, utilizing the resources that we provided, like STAR and School Pace and ERLA, and in terms of providing that information to parents.
Yeah,
so I really appreciate your support in that.
Jay, you sure? You
No,
sure?
Just great job, folks. Thanks so much. God love you. Your jobs are, as everybody's been saying, your jobs are incredible, and the responsibilities you have, and
Mike,
God love you, do a
I
great
just
job.
wanted to say, it sounds like, when you hear everybody talk, this Tier 1, that has been neglected, it seems like, and I think that's something where everybody needs to work on. I go back to the early days when if a child wasn't learning, forget about Tier 1, you just sent their name to the special ed department. And you consider the child maybe having a special needs issue, and he needed to get tested. None of this Tier 1 stuff and making sure that you're using every avenue possible. I mean, we've come a real long way, and it's become very diagnostic instead of just shoving all the problems over to the special ed department, which is what you did, So keep it up. Good job.
Kath, did you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. Thank you, Dr. Menzo, for broaching the subject of true data and not massaging it or making it, something that it's not. I think this board, and hopefully most of us will still be here next year, want the truth. Because we can't help you if we don't have the facts.
Right.
And even if one school if the numbers were so skewed, it was like, oh my God, what's going on in my school? Well, that's where we would then concentrate and say, what can we do to help that school? If you kind of try to fudge it, that's not helping anybody, especially the kids. So please always feel that you can bring to this board the facts. That's what we want to hear.
Well said. Yeah, well said there. I'm assuming there really aren't any questions from the public, but yeah. I want to, I'm being fair to my agenda, everything that everybody said, you guys are amazing. But what I really like I just want to wrap it up by saying what I really appreciated hearing from really every single one of you was the fact of looking at the whole child. That social and social and emotional component along with the education piece, and recognizing how fragile these little people are. And you guys, the passion in all your voices is so sincere, and I'm sure you get so many rewards with all your frustrations, but to just watch them grow and mature has got to be pretty awesome. And, you know, I think, Jay, you made an excellent point in that it is a community issue, and that how we can encourage as a Board of Ed for all families to feel safe and comfortable to be in our schools and to ask questions and get involved and stay involved is really, it's the part of the stool, it's one of those legs that is really, really critical. And I imagine one of the hardest things, you can bring them, you can offer them food, you can offer them everything, but, if they don't come, they don't come, that's really challenging. So I respect how hard that must be. Pat?
Yeah, I was just gonna echo what everybody else has been saying. I'm sure most of you know that I taught in another school district, and again, I just have to commend you on your passion, the integrity, the honesty. There's times I didn't see that, and I think, really, every single one of you, I was really impressed. Just you felt, what's best, what's best for our children. And Jay said, the more we give them the opportunity to improve, the better off they're going to be later on.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, go for it, Amanda.
Sorry for being late. Ooh, hello, testing.
I railroaded your meeting. Sorry, guys.
Sorry for being late. I apologize. But I just want to say, as my term's coming to an end, I really appreciate all that you do. Originally, when I came to Wallingford before I was getting married, I always figured my kid was going to private school because I went to private high school, and I just figured that was what I was going to do. And you all and the teachers I've met and Central Office has given me the utmost confidence in Wallingford. And I've shared that with my friends who have, little ones that are yet to go to school. And it's just very exciting to see what's going on and how progressive our district is and everything the administrators are doing and the teachers. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I hope to keep in touch in the coming years. That's pretty much it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And with that, this meeting's adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks for taking the time.